Hi everyone, the partial prophet here. Thanks for tuning in. So I wanted to remind you that we know in part and we prophesy in part, and then when Jesus comes, we will see fully. So today's video is called We Will Not Bow, Daniel in the Lion's Den. So I wanted to just talk about some information about what's going on right now in America. And one of the things that would be helpful to understand is that there are two nations right now in America. So, another way that's talked about in the Bible is you probably remember Jesus talking about the parable of the wheat and the tares. And so, with the wheat and the tares grow up together. And then, as they mature, then you start recognizing whether someone's a wheat or someone's a tare. And then also we see in the book of Daniel, I think it's Daniel who has the tree, or maybe it's Nebuchadnezzar that has the dream about the statue with the 10 toes, and the toes are a mixture of clay and iron. So that's another picture of the two groups of people. And then we also know the parable that Jesus had with the sheep and the goats. Okay, that's probably the most well-known parable. So I wanted to talk about, because this story of Esau and Jacob's birth, I think, is a good picture of the time frame that we're in right now. I think this is a prophetic shadow of the time frame that we're in. So let's read this story. This is from Genesis 25. And it says, "Now these are the records of the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel the Aramean of Paddan Aram, the sister of Laban the Aramean, to be his wife." So Rebekah definitely has, a genealogy, an important genealogy. "Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren, and the Lord answered him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. But the children struggled together within her, and she said, 'If it is so, why then am I this way?' So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, 'Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples will be separated from your body. And one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger.' When her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. Now the first came forth red, all over like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau. Afterwards his brother came forth with his hand holding on to Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to them. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the field. But Jacob was a peaceful man, living in tents. Now Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebekah loved Jacob." Okay, so let's unpack this here. So what we have is Rebekah's pregnant, and it's twins, okay? And it's interesting because they're struggling together within her, okay? So much so that she's like, what is going on? So she was trying to figure out, so it was very interesting that Esau and Jacob, even before they were born, were like fighting with each other. So very interesting. And so what we have now in America is, what we see is kind of this same concept of like two nations, two groups of people in America that like are fighting with each other, okay? And so it's actually kind of interesting because I've been kind of wondering if there's really more like kind of like three nations in America. But then maybe it is only just two, because really, if you look at the people on the far right, a lot of their behavior is similar to the behavior of the people on the left, that there's still the rebellion against the government, and there's still kind of the tendency for violence, um, and there's still the tendency to want to take matters into their own hands. Um, and so, because what we had was like with the protest of like Trump's people, they weren't trusting the government. Um, they were kind of believing the conspiracy theories that, maybe even that the coronavirus wasn't even maybe even true, but that, or they were believing that someone was behind the coronavirus to try to take away their rights. So they weren't trusting the government. Um, and so they were protesting, and then they weren't following the rules of the government. They weren't wearing masks when they were protesting, they weren't social distancing, um, you know, and I mean, I don't think there was, I don't remember hearing about any like looting and, um, what do you call it? Just destruction going on. This was back earlier before um, the Black Lives Matter riots. I don't remember like destruction happened during the riots, but there was still, they were still creating, um, they were still being a problem because they weren't following the rules and stuff. Um, and I think now too that we're kind of like seeing the backlash from that because, there's a spike in coronavirus and stuff. Um, so maybe they could kind of be considered, almost from the same cloth, even though what drives them, it's a different mindset. Um, but it's still believing conspiracy theories. The conspiracy theories are just different. Um, and so then, so the two nations would be like the followers of God, um, plus, versus the followers of, well, the people that don't follow God. But what's interesting though is, so let's think about this. I mean, I don't know how much we see like God's people kind of struggling with, the people that don't follow God. Um, but because I kind of think of God's people just kind of being more quiet and, just staying home and avoiding all the all the craziness in the cities and stuff like that. Um, but we do, so maybe, in verse 22 where it says, but the children struggled together within her, maybe that is kind of showing us there where, um, there are kind of like the two groups, the Trump followers and then the Obama followers. And then there is sort of like a third group, you know, which would be, the followers of Jesus. And so then when we get to verse 23, and God says, two nations are in your womb, and two peoples will be separated from your body, um, that's kind of going back to the sheep and the goat story. Um, and so, anyway, so it's kind of interesting to see Rebecca. She's saying, if it is so, then why, then why am I this way? Um, and so the NISB, the way they translated it, it's a little interesting. Because they had to add some words. If it is so, why then am I? Um, so I thought that was kind of interesting because it kind of reminds me of like Mary pondering at the birth of Jesus. Um, just kind of wondering. And, so really, I definitely think that God's people right now are wondering, what is going on because it is crazy out there. I mean, it's just the world is like upside down. Um, and so that would be the where we're at prophetically. We're like Rebecca wondering what's going on. So what that means is we're suffering the birth pangs. And so there's about to be a birth. Um, and there's going to be a birth of two nations basically. Um, and that two two peoples are going to be separated. Um, after the birthing. And so it says, one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Um, so the older ends up being Esau, and he ends up serving Jacob. Um, so let's see. So let's look at, okay, when her days to be delivered. So I thought it was interesting that it's verse 24. It says, when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her wombs. I thought that was interesting because I'm looking at June 24th as being a high watch day. So I just thought that was interesting. And then behold, there are twins in her womb. So what we're going to see is, um, like, I think what we're going to see is kind of the birthing of, two different people. I think the Messiah is going to show up, and I think we're going to see Obama come back. Okay. Now it says, now the first came forth red, all over like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau. Okay, so when you see red, I think you could think of, like blood. Um, and then when it talks about him having like, so think of red would be like blood on his hands. Okay, and then when he has a hairy garment, what's interesting about that is that like Joseph, before he comes before Pharaoh, he shaves. Um, he's shaved before Pharaoh. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So maybe there's a prophetic shadow of, um, you know, this hairy garment. And so the people that shaved means they didn't, kind of buy into, they're not following Obama. Okay. Um, and that'd be kind of interesting when you think about, you know, like God's people right now, are we taking on the lies of the Black Lives Matter movement, or are we ignoring it? And knowing that it's a lie. So are we staying, clean shaven, you know? Um, okay, so the first one, the first came forth red, so that would definitely be Obama. And then it says afterwards, his brother came forth with his hand holding on to Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob. And then it said, and Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to them. Okay. So I think it's possible. Okay, so Jacob holding on to Esau's heel. I see possible two fulfillments of this verse where if Jacob is the Messiah, um, and you could say that he is, because then Jacob is described as a peaceful man living in tents. Then what you have is the Messiah, like, we read in Revelation where um, the dragon is like waiting for the baby to be born, um, because he wants to, destroy the baby being born. He wants to devour the baby being born. Um, and so what we could have here is the Messiah is, Esau's trying to, stomp on his head, and so Jesus is, like keeping Esau from squishing his head. But another way we could look at that too is that if, Jacob is a picture of Trump, because, if I mean, it kind of depends on if you look at this as a short term verse or a long term verse. And I mean, I really think God's prophecy is really rich, and that you can get, kind of like multiple fulfillments out of His word. I mean, I think, God's just so incredible. His prophecies really kind of tell us a whole bunch of stuff and different time frames too. And so we did have, in this country, we did have Obama. He was first. And then we had Trump followed him. Um, and so if you just look at Trump and Obama, I think they are definitely like twins, because um, Trump, um, he still has some of the left ways of thinking in his life. Obama made things hard for Israel. Trump made things hard for Israel. There's just a lot of parallels. And basically, they're both people that really are not friends of God, for various reasons. And, so then you could say that, Jacob holding on to Esau's heel could be a picture more like that Jacob kind of walks like Esau. Um, so his hand holding onto his heel, the heel would be what you walk on. Um, you know, oh, and then there would be kind of that picture too of, definitely Obama's followers were wanting to crush Trump's head, you know. So, um, you know, but in the short term, like, if we're just seeing a birth coming now, I definitely think the birth this time around, is we're gonna see the birthing of the Messiah, but I think Obama's coming back at the same time too. Um, and so then what I said earlier about, the Messiah trying to keep um, the dragon from crushing his head, we see that. And then you would have, so then it says Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to them. So then Isaac here would be a picture of Trump. And so, because what we have is that 6 number connected to Isaac. Um, so, um, and I don't know, let me think, and so when Obama first became president, it could have been that the 60 could have been connected to, it could have been around the time frame of 60 years of Israel. I don't know, I can't do my math really quick in my head, but, maybe America was 60 years old when Trump, kind of became president around that time frame. Or maybe Netanyahu. I don't know. So, anyways, we'll have to think about that later. So then it says, when the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the field. Okay. And so, a hunter, would be someone that kills. Um, you know, so what we see here is the contrast between a man of the field and then someone who lives in tents. So a man of the field would be kind of like a wild person. And so, what we see is Esau, being, as Obama, Obama's going to go to destruction. Okay. That, when he comes, he's the, you know, he comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Um, so then, and then we have, Jacob was a peaceful man living in tents. So definitely a picture of the Messiah. And then what we see with that picture is, so when Messiah comes, he is going to, get his people, and they're going to be living in the Feast of Booths. The protection, because that's the whole point of the Messiah coming, is to, he has to protect us from this destruction that Obama and Obama's people are going to be doing. And so Jesus is going to come and protect us, put us in our booths. Or put the blood of the Passover lamb on our door. Um, So then it says, now Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebecca loved Jacob. Okay, so Isaac here could be a picture of, oh, I already said that Isaac was a picture of Trump. And so what we see is, so, I mean, this could be another way of saying, that Trump was like Obama. Okay, because it says, now Isaac had a taste for game. Okay, which is, Trump and his people like to live the high life, and I talked in my other video about, how they were craving meat, that they connect to the people in the wilderness that were craving meat. So that's what we see. And then, but what we see here is Rebecca would be a picture of the bride because she loved Jacob. Okay, so Rebecca, the bride, loves Jacob, who's a picture of the Messiah. Okay, and so then we have in a Hosea. Okay, so let's read about this. Ephraim feeds on wind and pursues the east wind continually. He multiplies lies and violence. Moreover, he makes a covenant with Assyria, and oil is carried to Egypt. The Lord also has a dispute with Judah, and will punish Jacob according to his ways. He will repay him according to his deeds. In the womb he took his brother by the heel, and in his maturity he contended with God. Yes, he wrestled with the angel and prevailed. He wept and sought his favor. He found him at Bethel, and there he spoke with us. Even the Lord, the God of hosts, the Lord is his name. Therefore return to your God, observe kindness and justice, and wait for your God continually. A merchant in whose hands are false balances, he loves to oppress. And Ephraim says, surely I have become rich. I have found wealth for myself. In all my labors they will find in me no iniquity, which would be sin. But I have been the Lord your God since the land of Egypt. I will make you live in tents again, as in the days of the appointed festival. Okay, so I think one of the reasons why I wanted to show you these verses is because I wanted to show you again too where we're seeing God working with Ephraim and Judah. And so Ephraim would be like the northern kingdom of Israel, and then Judah would be the southern kingdom. And so what God says about Ephraim, which is America, he says they feed on the wind and they pursue the east wind continually, which I think, like Obama, the Antichrist would be the east wind. Maybe there's a connection with Trump in the east wind. And so then it says he multiplies lies and violence. Okay, is that now what's going on in America right now? I think so. And then it says, moreover, he makes a covenant with Assyria, and oil is carried to Egypt. And so we have America making covenants with, the wrong people, and carrying the oil to Egypt. So let me think. So oil being carried to Egypt, that could be like our riches are being given to the wrong people, to maybe Israel's enemies. I mean, definitely with Egypt, you have that picture of, like with the Exodus story where Egypt, is, the enemies of God, and so, and you don't want to go to Egypt. You don't want to be in Egypt. You want to come out of Egypt. And then it says the Lord also has a dispute with Judah because let me tell you right now, um, God's mad at America because of, well, obviously the great falling away and Trump's deal of the century dividing the land of Israel, are, not following God, abortions, just a lot of things. We're definitely, there's a lot of rebellion, a lot of behavior in this country that does not glorify God. And then, so then God says, and he will punish Jacob according to his ways. He will repay him according to his deeds. And And so then it says, in the womb, he took his brother by the heel, and then in his maturity, he contended with God. Um, so let me see if I could figure this out here. So what we're saying, so like Jacob, maybe in the womb would be, um, you know, okay. I mean, it could be, so I wrote Trump, here where, um, obviously there's something that God's doing with Jacob, his name being Jacob, and then at some point he becomes Israel. Because Israel, it has the name of God in it, El. Um, so sometimes when you see the name Jacob, think about that, what maybe God's using the names that way. Um, so um, so he wants to punish Jacob according to his ways, and then he will repay him according to his deeds. So what we have, like, so maybe in the wound, while God's, still waiting to birth the Messiah, we had Trump, like taking his brother by the heel. That could be Trump taking Judah by the heel, because we definitely had Trump, um, causing Netanyahu and Israel to, trip, and walk the wrong way. And then it's, and then we have in his maturity, he contended with God. Well, when Jacob matures, he becomes Israel. Um, so, because then it goes on to say he wrestled with the angel and prevailed. He wept and saw his favor, and he found him at Bethel. And so, um, this could be, I'm trying to think, in his maturity, he contended with God. So what that could be is a picture of America, in our maturity, we're fighting with God right now. And then it says, yes, he wrestled with the angel and prevailed. So what we have maybe is, um, God's enemies are prevailing over, um, God's people. So then it says he wept and saw his favor. So that would be a picture of God's people, weeping because of the struggles. And then it says he found him at Bethel, and there he spoke with us. Okay, so this is where we move into the Messiah. Okay, so we found him at Bethel. Bethel sounds like Bethlehem. Um, you know, um, and then, well, Bethel would be house of God. And then, and there he spoke with us. That would be a picture of the Messiah speaking with us. And then it says, even the Lord, the God of hosts, the Lord is his name. Therefore, return to your God, observe kindness and justice, and wait for your God continually. So hang in there and wait for your God continually, because we'll have the Messiah come and he'll speak with us. Okay, so then it goes on to say, a merchant in whose hands are false balances, he loves to oppress. So we're still, I think, talking about Ephraim here, which is America. But, what I really think is that Trump is the merchant. Okay. So that would be the third horseman. The third horseman is the one carrying the scales, the balances. And so, God says that it's false balances, okay? The wrong weight of things, okay? And then it says he loves to oppress. And then Ephraim says, surely I have become rich. I have found wealth for myself. In all my labors, they will find in me no iniquity, which would be sin. So think of Babylon, okay? So this connects Ephraim to Babylon, okay? Which I really think is true, that America is Babylon, okay? And then God said, but I have been the Lord your God since the land of Egypt. I will make you live in tents again as in the days of the appointed festival. Okay, we've already seen, um, that with the coronavirus shutdown, okay? But then when Jesus comes too, we'll be, put in our tents again. God's people. to protect us. We're going to want to be in our tents. Trust me. Um, okay. So then in Romans 9 it says, I am telling the truth in Christ. I am not lying. My conscience testifies with me in the Holy Spirit that I have great sorrow and unceasing grief in my heart. For I could wish that I myself were accursed, separated from Christ for the sake of my brethren, my kinsmen according to the flesh, who are Israelites, to whom belongs the adoption as sons, and the glory of the covenants, and the giving of the law, and the temple service, and the promises, whose are the fathers, and from whom is the Christ according to the flesh, who is over all. God blessed forever. Amen. But it is not as though the word of God has failed, for they are not all Israel, who are descended from Israel, nor are they all children, because they are Abraham's descendants, but through Isaac your descendants will be named. That is, it is not the children of the flesh who are children of God, but the children of the promise are regarded as descendants. For this is the word of promise. At this time I will come, and Sarah will have a son. And not only this, but there was Rebekah also, when she had conceived twins by one man, our father Isaac. For though the twins were not yet born and had not done anything good or bad, so that God's purpose according to his choice would stand, not because of works, but because of him who calls, it was said to her, the older will serve the younger. Just as it is written, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. What shall we say then? There is no injustice with God, is there? May it never be. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. So then it does not depend on the man who wills or the man who runs, but on God who has mercy. For the scripture says to Pharaoh, for this very purpose I raised you up, to demonstrate my power in you, and that my name might be proclaimed throughout the whole earth. So then he has mercy on whom he desires, and he hardens whom he desires. Or does not the potter have the right over the clay to make from the same lump one vessel for honorable use and another for common use? What if God, although willing to demonstrate his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction? And he did so to make known the riches of his glory upon vessels of mercy, which he prepared beforehand for glory. Even us, whom he also called, not from among Jews only, but also from among Gentiles. Okay. So it's kind of interesting. At the beginning, it kind of seems like he's talking about, kind of the difference between the Jewish people and the Gentiles. But then, like, we kind of move into talking about this concept that out of the nation of Israel, we're going to have some of the people are going to be children of the promise, and other people are just going to be, like out of the same bloodlines, but they're not going to get saved. Okay. And so, because like the best way it explains it is in verse 21, where it says, does not the potter have a right over the clay to make from the same lump one vessel for honorable use and another for common use? Okay. So out of, we have like Jewish people, and then we have Christians that descended from, the nation of Israel. Okay. But some of them are going to get saved and some of them aren't going to get saved. Okay. And so, because it's only the children of the promise that are the descendants. Okay. So, I mean, this is just a pretty deep mystery of God. But I wanted you to see this because it will help you understand what's going on in America right now, because it's bizarre that in a country we have, like people in America, we have Americans fighting against America. It's just bizarre. It's bizarre behavior. Okay. But if you understand that, the reason why it is because there's two groups of people, two groups of Americans. We have the Americans that are going to get saved and become a part of God's kingdom, and then we have the other Americans that are not going to get saved. Okay. Um, and so then it says, let's see. Um, okay, so Rebecca, when she had conceived twins by one man, our father Isaac, though the twins were not yet born and had not done anything good or bad, so that would be back when they, the wheat and the tares. You didn't know yet who was a wheat and who was a tare. Okay. Um, so it was kind of interesting because I realized while I was talking about this that my earlier slide, when I was talking about Rebecca's birth, I was really kind of talking about, like the Messiah and, um, and Obama and Trump, but, really the story is, about the two nations, um, that follow those people, even though it still works talking about the individuals. So, um, so Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. So what that means is, the God's people, the ones that follow God, he loves, okay, but then he hates, you know, um, these rebellious, destructive people, okay, that don't follow him, that don't honor him. Um, so okay, um, so God says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. So really God decides, and so it has nothing to do with the man. Okay. It has nothing to do with the man who wills or the man who runs, but on God who has mercy. um you know um God's the potter. He decides, when he makes someone, whether they're going to be for honorable use or for common use. And then let's see. um so, oh yeah, so he sees, for the scripture says to Pharaoh, for this very purpose I raised you up to demonstrate my power in you, that my name might be proclaimed throughout the whole earth. Okay, so God raised up, um like, so Pharaoh, remember how God would like harden Pharaoh's heart and stuff like that. So God was, he uses these people that are for common use, and you know turns their heart however he desires, and has them act a certain way, um, because he's trying to demonstrate his power and that he wants his name proclaimed. Okay. And so and I think here, I think Pharaoh is Trump. Okay. And that, God had a purpose for raising him up and making him president. Um, and we'll see that when the Messiah comes and how it all plays out. um but basically God wants his name proclaimed throughout the whole earth. So I think what happens is the Messiah comes and uh has some interactions with Trump. Okay, and it probably will make the news. And it's just going to be interesting to see how that works. I talked earlier about how, when Jesus comes, Jesus, the first time on earth, he had to deal with Peter and he had to deal with Judas. Okay. I think Peter is definitely a picture of Trump, and then Judas is a picture of Obama. So I think we're going to see that play out again. Okay. Those are prophecies that are going to play out. Okay. Um, Okay, willing to demonstrate his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much patience vessels of wet wrath. Okay, do you not agree that God has been awfully, awfully, awfully patient with the Black Lives Matter people? Um, but hang in there. Their destiny is, they're going to be destroyed. Okay. So hang in there. Okay. And then it says, and he did so to make known the riches of his glory upon vessels of mercy, which he prepared beforehand for glory. Okay, so quite a mystery. We don't quite understand it, but this is how God is preparing us for the Messianic era, having to, kind of endure, these trials right now. It has a lot to do with, because it's a time of testing. God is using it to see who people are going to bow to in this time right now. You know, so, but he's chastising us, he's um, purifying us, he's getting us ready. Um, and so we're vessels of mercy, which he prepared beforehand for glory. So we're going to get to see God's glory, okay? And so it would be people that he has called, not just from among the Jews, but also from the Gentiles, okay? Okay. So then let's talk about the lion's den, okay? So let's see. Let's read this. So it seemed good to Darius to appoint 120 satraps over the kingdom, that they would be in charge of the whole kingdom, and over them 3 commissioners, of whom Daniel was one, that these satraps might be accountable to them, and that the king might not suffer loss. Then this Daniel began distinguishing himself among the commissioners and satraps, because he possessed an extraordinary spirit, and the king planned to appoint him over the entire kingdom. Then the commissioners and satraps began trying to find a ground of accusation against Daniel in regard to government affairs, but they could find no ground of accusation or evidence of corruption, inasmuch as he was faithful, and no negligence or corruption was to be found in him. Then these men said, we will not find any ground of accusation against this Daniel unless we find it against him with regard to the law of his God. Then these commissioners and satraps came by agreement to the king and spoke to him as follows: King Darius live forever. All the commissioners of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the high officials and the governors, have consulted together that the king should establish a statute and enforce an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days shall be cast into the lion's den. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document, so that it may not be changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which may not be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document, that is the injunction. Okay. So what we have is, so I think like Daniel is both a messianic figure, but he could also be a picture of, just God's people. Okay. And then it's interesting that these commissioners and satraps were trying to find a ground of accusation against Daniel in regard to government affairs, because we see that happening right now with Black Lives Matter, where they're trying to accuse, God's people and other people in the government and the police of, you know, wrongdoing. They're trying to accuse them. Okay. And we see that, like, Jesus said in the last days, that we're going to be persecuted, you know. Okay, so then these men said, okay. So what's interesting is that, okay, so these, what they're saying, okay, so it's kind of interesting that these commissioners and satraps came by agreement to the king and spoke to him as follows. All the commissioners and everybody wanted to establish a statute and enforce an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days shall be cast into the lion's den. Okay, so what I am thinking here is, what we kind of have is, okay, so what I'm wondering, I highlighted the 120 satraps, and then I highlighted the 3 commissioners, okay? Because what I think it has to do is I really believe that there's 2 two times, um, two different time frames of 30 days. Okay, so we had, okay, so here's what happened. We had the shutdown for 40 days. Okay, the coronavirus shutdown. Okay, so then on April 26th was when the country started opening up. Okay, when Trump started, trying to get the country open up. Um, and so what I think was we had 30 days of, like, you know, where there was this testing of 30 days of whether people were going to, follow Trump, um, like bow down to him, um, like bow down to or answer the call of Babylon, and try to get back to their previous lives. I talked about this in another video. Um, and so we had that happen for 30 days. Okay. And so we had Trump kind of like trying to act like a messianic figure, and he was trying to get the churches opened, um, and he opened them for Memorial Day. Okay. Um, and so I think, so so we had that, and then now we've been in the second time frame of, I'm thinking it's only going to be for 30 days too, where it's been the 30 days of the rioting with the Black Lives Matter. Okay, so we definitely see in here where they're trying to enforce. Okay, so in this story of Daniel, we're seeing, these commissioners and prefects and satraps are trying to enforce this injunction. They're trying to, like, basically, the people that aren't willing to bow down are going to get thrown into the lion's den. Okay, they want to push their beliefs onto, um, Daniel, um, you know, and others. Okay, so that's what we see especially during the Black Lives Matter, is that they really want to push their agenda onto others, and they want us to bow down. Okay, um, um, but and so I think the 120 satraps connect to the 30 days of Trump, because at the end of, um, on the day, so let's see, May 26th was exactly 120 days after, um, um, the deal of the century. Okay. And then what we have is so then it's like we moved into three commissioners. So let me think about this here. That is kind of interesting, because May 17th, I think it was when, in Israel, Benny Gantz and Benjamin Netanyahu, they got together and formed a government. And so, that's back to, like, are there two Benjamins or three Benjamins? I think the third Benjamin is Messiah, you know. Um, but that also could be a picture of, with Black Lives Matter, where they don't really have one leader right now. It's more um, they're they don't really have a leader. But then the number three could connect. It's kind of interesting, because it's almost like you could say it backwards. Like the 120 satraps would represent Black Lives Matter, and then the three commissioners could represent Trump. But since it's in this order, we'll do it this way. And then, but the three could connect to, like, the 30 days. Okay. Um, because I was thinking about this early, because we do see this concept of 30 days. And so what I think we had is the 120 days, which took us to May 26th, and then there's 30 more days. So that's why tomorrow's a really important date. It could be when things turn around. Okay. Um, so like I said, I think we're in this time of testing because, I mean, when you read this, if you say that, like, God is the king, okay, and then it says anyone who makes a petition to any god or man besides God the king for 30 days shall be cast into the lion's den. I mean, it works that way too, okay? But we have definitely for 30 days been in a lion's den, okay, because we've had the country is falling apart around us, okay? Um, for 30 days. But I also definitely think it's a 30-day testing period of God to see what, if we're going to bow. And oh my gosh, we have seen so many people falling, okay, during this time, kneeling before the Black Lives Matter. We have all these companies right now that are, putting ads on their web pages about Black Lives Matter. People, and so this is definitely the great falling away. Um, I mean, probably kind of like the end of, we definitely had a bunch of people fall away during the time of Obama being president, and then this is like the culmination of that, um, but I mean, people have been so brainwashed in this country with the left, their agenda and their lies, and so we're seeing people fall, you know. Um, so, and if you don't understand, the Black Lives Matter is a cult. It's not true that this is a racist country. This has been one of the countries, um, you know, I mean, it is not a racist country. Okay. I mean, and it's not about race. Okay. So let's get out of politics here. It's not about race. It's about um, the reason why they hate this country. They hate this country because it's a Christian country. I mean, it is really, it's one of the temples of God. Okay, we have the nation of Israel and the nation of America, and those are God's nations. Okay, and so they hate it because it belongs to God, and they are of their father, the devil. Okay, and I mean, if you really understand this, like, look at Iran, how they are constantly saying death to Israel and death to America. Okay, so we may not believe that, America is, part of God's, you know, kingdom, God's land, but they understand it in Iran, okay, because, you know, they know who their enemy is. They hate America and they hate Israel, you know. Um, so that's what's happening. It's all about they hate God, okay, and they hate his people and they hate his country and they hate his rules. Um, they hate laws. They're this is the mystery of lawlessness. They hate law, okay. And God's about laws, to follow God, you follow certain laws. You don't um, kill people. You don't um, you worship God is one of the laws, you only have um you know you only have marriage between a man and a woman, things like that. They don't like those laws. God calls them to not kill their babies. They want to kill their babies, so that's the deal. It's not about race. It's about um it's the mystery of lawlessness and wickedness. Okay. um um So, anyways, and then also too, God's allowing it to happen because we're under judgment for the deal of the century. So we're under judgment for the 666. And so what we've had is 40 days judgment. Okay, so the 40-day coronavirus shutdown was judgment for Trump moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Okay, so it has to do with we weren't willing to just stay put in in Israel, we wanted to move. Okay, so then God said, okay, I'm going to punish you and make you stay put in America, you know. Um, and then, um, and then this, the second six that were being judged for was, you know, um, well, Trump opening the country. Um, um, and then now the third six that were being judged for is the riots. Okay. I know it sounds weird because, like, how did Trump opening the country? Why was that judgment? Um, but I mean, it was still a hard time because it was very hard to open the country. Because we still had coronavirus going around. Um, but that was the time frame. Um, so okay, so back to Daniel. Okay, so Um, oh, and so it's kind of interesting where it says, like, therefore King Darius signed the document that is the injunction. Okay, so that could be a picture of Trump where we had Trump out, kind of like he did something to try to appease the Black Lives Matter. Okay. So he signed something, that had to do with police reform, blah, 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 blah. So that's what he did. Okay. And so then we had Daniel, okay, so going on with Daniel. Now, when Daniel knew that the document was signed, he entered his house. Now, in his roof chamber, he had windows open toward Jerusalem. And he continued kneeling on his knees 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks before his God, as he had been doing previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and supplication before his God. Then they approached and spoke before the king about the king's injunction. Did you not sign an injunction that any man who makes any petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days shall be cast into the lion's den? The king replied, the statement is true according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which may not be revoked. So do you kind of see like the stories being repeated twice here? You know? I mean, it really kind of is. And I think that has to do with because there's 2 times of 30 days. Then they answered and spoke before the king. Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the injunction which you signed, but keeps making his petition 3 times a day. Then, as soon as the king heard his statement, he was deeply distressed and set his mind on delivering Daniel. And even until sunset, he kept exerting himself to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, recognize, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or statute with the king establishes may be changed. Then the king gave orders, and Daniel was brought in and cast into the lion's den. The king spoke and said to Daniel, your God whom you constantly serve will himself deliver you. The stone was brought and laid over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring, and with the signet ring of his nobles, so that nothing would be changed in regard to Daniel. Then the king went off to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no entertainment was brought before him, and his sleep fled from him. Um, okay, so um, um, so what we see is, okay, so I'm trying to think. So we had Daniel, he was righteous, and so he gets thrown into the lion's den. And kind of like with the fiery furnace, I think we want to be in the lion's den. I mean, Jesus is the lion of the tribe of Judah. And so I think basically the story is showing us that if we don't bow to any other god besides, you know, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we are going to be able to be in Jesus's den, basically. And then so it says the king spoke and said to Daniel, your God whom you constantly serve will himself deliver you. That's like Jesus coming, being the Messiah, saying, your God whom you constantly serve will himself deliver you. God's going to deliver us. Okay. And then it says a stone was brought and laid over the mouth of the den. Okay, so you know how Jesus is the cornerstone. Um, And it says the king sealed it with his own signet ring and the signet ring of his nobles so that nothing would be changed in regard to Daniel. So what we have is this picture of, Daniel's actually kind of like safely tucked into the lion's den. Okay. And sealed with the king's seal. We see in Revelation where, God's going to be sealing, um, his people with his seal, Um, okay, and then it says the king went off to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no entertainment was brought before him, and his sleep fled from him. So I don't know, like, so that could be a picture of the Messiah, because after, like 7 days, then he goes up on the mountaintop. Um, you know, um, because then it says the king arose at dawn. Okay, so that could definitely be a picture of the Messiah, the resurrection of the Messiah, and went in haste to the lion's den. Okay, so then he said, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you constantly serve, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel spoke to the king. O king, live forever. My God sent his angel. Okay, so that's a picture of the Messiah. And shut the lions' mouths. And they have not harmed me, inasmuch as I was found innocent before him, and also toward you, O king, I have committed no crime. So what we see is, God's going to send his angel to shut the lions' mouths. Okay, so Jesus is going to shut the protesters' mouths. Okay, and protect us from, he's, that's why, God has to cut the time short, because, otherwise, these people are gonna kill us, um, so God talks about he needs to cut the time short, otherwise no one will survive. Okay. Um, so then the king was pleased and gave orders for Daniel to be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den. No injury whatsoever was found on him because he had trusted in his God. No injury, sorry, whatever was found on him because he had trusted in his God. So actually, I kind of think now this could be a picture of, you know, like in the story, I think we could see a picture of, um, when it says that the king went in haste to the lion's den, I think what that could be a picture of is, Jesus. Okay, so I told you that, we're going to see Israel get attacked, and then, at around the same time, Jesus is coming back. And then we're going to have Jesus is going to go to, resurrect the people that got killed in Israel. Okay. So that could be what we're seeing here. So then it says the king was very pleased and gave orders for Daniel to be taken up out of the den. See Jesus, think of Jesus doing that. So Daniel was taken up out of the den. No injury whatsoever was found on him because he had trusted in his God. Okay, so just a really cool story. Just like with Daniel's three friends in the fiery furnace, they don't smell at all like fire. Okay. Then the king gave orders, and they brought those men who had maliciously accused Daniel, and they cast them, their children and their wives, into the lion's den, and they had not reached the bottom of the den before the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Okay. So that could be a picture of, Jesus having victory over his enemies. Okay. So anyways, so definitely a great story. Okay. Okay, so then so the moral of that story, of the Daniel story, is don't bow to any other god besides the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, so then in Babylon, Revelation 17, we read about Babylon, and it says, here is the mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and they are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come, and when he comes he must remain a little while. The beast which was and is not is himself also an 8th, and is of the 7, and goes to destruction. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. These will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome him, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are the called and chosen and faithful. And he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot, and will make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh, and will burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose, and by giving their kingdom to the beast until the words of God be fulfilled. The woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Okay, um, so what we have here is, okay, so the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Okay, so the 7 mountains are the 7 churches. Okay, so what we have is Trump in the 7 churches. So what we see is that, Trump, has kind of like, you know, in his presidency has, tried to, do things to make the evangelicals happy. Okay. And then it says, okay, and then it talks about there being 7 kings, 5 have fallen, one is, the other has not yet come, and when he comes, he must remain a little while. Okay, so, what I think this is 7 presidents. 5 have fallen, which means they're no longer president. And then one currently is, so that would be Trump. And then it says the other has not yet come, and when he comes, he must remain a little while. That would be Messiah. And like I said before that I think Messiah is only going to be here for like a week, and then he goes up on the mountain or whatever. He stops restraining, so that Obama can kill Trump's people, basically. So then the beast which was and is not is himself also an eighth, and is of the 7, and he goes to destruction. Okay, so what we have is, Obama was like the 6th president, and then, he becomes the 8th. Okay, so Trump is like the 7th, and then Obama's the 8th. And then it says he's also an 8th, because I think Messiah is also an 8th too. And then it, see, what does it say about this beast? He goes to destruction. Okay, so that's what we're gonna see with Obama. It's all about destruction. Okay, because they hate. Oh well, we'll go read this. It's okay. So then it says the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. Okay, so the 1 hour that relates to, so what I think is the day of judgment was the coronavirus, and then now the hour of judgment has been these riots. Okay. And then to understand the 10 kings or the 10 horns is, so remember in the story of, in the Exodus story, they sent 12 spies, and 2 of them had faith and the other 10 did not have faith. Okay, when they spied out the land, the 10, remember, okay, because this is the Black Lives Matter, because they said bad things about the land. Okay, they didn't have faith, you know and and so then, but we had Caleb and Joshua. They had faith, they had a different spirit than the other 10. Okay, so that's the 10 horns. Okay, and then it's interesting that they get authority like they're kings for 1 hour. Okay, so that's what we see right now, because we have these Black Lives Matter are, they're acting like they're in charge, they're acting like kings. Um, and what's interesting too is that they're also acting like they're judge, jury, and executioner, too. Um, which a king would have that kind of power, you know. Um, but that just is not what our country was founded on. We're a democracy. Okay. Um, okay, so then it says about these 10 horns, they have one purpose and they give their power and authority to the beast. Okay. So that could be a picture of, so they have power and authority, and then, they end up handing it over to um Obama when he shows up. Okay. Um so we'll have to see how that plays out. And then it says these will wage war against the lamb, and the lamb will overcome him because he is Lord of Lords and King of Kings, and those who are with him are the called and chosen and faithful. So first of all, the when it says these will wage war against the lamb, first of all, that could be a picture of, so Rachel, I think the name Rachel means lamb. Okay, little lamb or whatever. Um, and so, so what we're seeing is, like waging war against God's people, and then we have Rachel weeping for her children because, right now, God's people, the church, is sad about what's going on in America. And then, but then it says the lamb, then the lamb, the lamb with the capital L, Messiah lamb, will overcome him because he is Lord of Lords and King of Kings. Um, and those who are with him are the called and chosen and faithful. And he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits. Okay, so the harlot would be Trump. Um, and I didn't put in the first part of this verse where it talks about the harlot more, but it says the harlot, she sits on these waters, which are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And basically, what that is the picture of like America mixing with the nations. Okay, basically. Um, and so as much as Trump wants to, say that he's like a Christian, he's really got a lot of that mixing with the nation kind of stuff. And he's all friends with the North Korea guy and and Putin and, all the dictators. He's friends with all of them. The Turkey guy. Um, you know, but it also has to do with, it's just, the people that follow Trump, would be different, peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Because actually that would be true because, you know, there's people around the world that are like Trump fans. It's just kind of weird. Like in India, I think he went there and they just like thought he was the greatest thing. And then it says, "In the 10 horns which you saw and the beast, these will hate the harlot," so they hate Trump, "and will make her desolate." And so they hate Trump and they hate America, and then it says, "will make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh and burn her up with fire." Okay, because that's what they're doing right now with America is um, eating her flesh and burning her up with fire. Okay, so they hate Trump and they hate America, and they're trying to destroy both Trump's presidency and America. Okay. For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose and by giving their kingdom to the beast until the words of God will be fulfilled. And then it says, the woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So, Babylon, the city. So it's kind of interesting too, because I don't know if you noticed, like the rioters have kind of been focusing on the cities. So I kind of think that like, you know, Babylon, is kind of like this the cities. Um, because there's kind of a connection with, the buying and the selling and the all the it talks about Babylon is really kind of like a commercial city. Okay. So it is just kind of interesting that they're going after, the stores, and looting the stores and stuff like that, and focusing on the cities. So kind of interesting. What's interesting too is I saw a picture today of, do you remember when the Romans destroyed the temple in Israel, way back, like in 70 AD? They took out of the temple um I mean, if I have my story straight, but one of the times when the temple was destroyed, they took out like the lamp stand and um the other things that were in, because there was a lot of gold and silver in the temple, and so they took that all out, and so there's this picture of like the Romans carrying, is it the Romans? Well, whoever it is that destroyed the temple carrying the lampstand, you know, and then some of the other, like maybe a goblet or something from the temple. So I saw that today, and and it reminded me of, we have the rioters now are like trying to pull down statues and stuff like that. Um, so you know, if you don't believe that history doesn't repeat itself, it is repeating itself. And so we have, God's enemies back when they destroyed the temple. Before they took, they were they were taking out the symbols of um the temple, and so that's what we have right now, where the rioters are, trying to pull down the statues and stuff like that. um so, it has a lot to do with that hatred and stuff like that. And obviously, like, back when they destroyed the temple and took out the lampstand and everything, that, like, there's a sense of, they like to kind of boast that, that they, they'll um they'll take these things, to kind of, because they're boasting about how they were able to destroy the temple, you know. But plus, too, they're probably wanting the gold and the silver. Um, so, um, what do they call it? They call it, um, oh, I forget, the spoils, you know. Okay, so then it says, after these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illumined with his glory. And he cried out with a mighty voice, saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place of demons, and a prison of every unclean spirit, and a prison of every unclean and hateful bird. For all the nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed acts of immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich by the wealth of her sensuality. I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, so that you will not participate in her sins and receive of her plagues. For her sins have piled up high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back even as she has paid, and give back to her double according to her deeds. In the cup which she has mixed, mix twice as much for her. To the degree that she glorified herself and lived sensuously, to the same degree give her torment and mourning. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen, and I am not a widow, and will never see mourning. For this reason, in one day her plagues will come, pestilence and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire. For the Lord God who judges her is strong, and the kings of the earth who committed acts of immorality and live sensuously with her will weep and lament over her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance because of the fear of her torment, saying, Woe, woe, the great city Babylon, the strong city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. Um, okay, so let's see what we'll talk about. So it's interesting because we see an angel coming down from heaven saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. And so what I think is interesting is that um, I think what we're going to see is kind of a repeat of this, like these verses. We're going to see a double fulfillment where um, we're going to see Israel then attacked by their enemies, and we're going to see the smoke of Israel's burning. Okay. And so I think that's what the fallen is, because it has to do with the two pillars. Okay. Um, um, so I think I have a picture of that later where I'll describe that. And then it says, or it'd be in one of my other video that I'm planning to do. Okay. So then it says, She has become a dwelling place of demons and a prison of every unclean spirit and a prison of every unclean and hateful bird. Okay, so what we have is America. I mean, this definitely applies to America, where you know, um, we have all these people roaming the cities, that are, probably possessed, and, um, you know, so we're seeing, just spiritual warfare happening, demonic stuff happening, but also we've seen kind of in this country, this has been going on for a while that, like, we saw especially with Obama where he was letting people out of prison, but we also saw Trump doing that similar behavior, but we also kind of moved into this country where we weren't, um, you know, like we were really kind of stepping back at like prosecuting or however you want to say it, uh, going against criminal behavior. Like we were starting to, like, what did we do? We legalized marijuana, we legalized gambling, um, so, and, like homelessness, all of a sudden became like we couldn't do anything with the homeless, we just had to let him be, and so, we've just seen that in this country. The left is all about the lawless person, and letting the lawless be lawless. I mean, seriously, that's what it's all about. And then it says, for all the nations have drunk of the wine of the passion of her immorality. So we've seen that where, you know, um, the left, is around the world, and we see the other nations, they're, it's so ironic. They've been having protests and rioting, with, carrying signs about George Floyd. Like, why do they care about what happened with George Floyd in America? But that's where I said it's not about race. It's not about George Floyd. It's about God's enemies hating, um, God, hating the things of God. Um, okay, and then it says the merchants of the earth have become rich by the wealth of her sensuality. Um, so then we hear another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, so that you will not participate in her sins and receive our plagues." So I made a video back when Trump's people were protesting and, wanting to get back to their, um, you know, uh, lives of sin. I said, don't, don't listen to the siren call of Babylon. And then now we definitely, do not answer the siren call of Black Lives Matter. So stay out of the, stay out of the cities, don't participate. Okay. Don't be participating in these protests. Um, So then it says, for her sins have piled up as high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Okay, so what we're seeing, we're getting into that time where, okay, I mean, we're under judgment. Okay, God is remembering America's iniquities. Okay. Um. So let's see. And then, so then as it says, like, give back to her double according to her deeds, so that connects to fallen is Babylon, and I think that connects to, um, that we're going to see the downfall of both America and Israel. Um, okay, so then it says, to the degree that she glorified herself and lived sensuously, to the same degree give her torment and mourning, for she says in her heart, I sit as a queen and I am not a widow and will never see mourning. Okay, so think of Trump when you read those verses. Okay. Um, and and so like Trump would be like Vashti, the queen that doesn't come when the king calls on the seventh day. Um, and then it says, in one day her plagues will come, pestilence and mourning and famine. So I said the coronavirus was the 1 day judgment. Um, and then it says she will be burned up with fire. So that's the 1 hour judgment, the rioting. Okay. And the kings of the earth who committed acts of immorality will weep and lament over her when they see the smoke of her burning. We definitely have already seen that fulfilled in America, but we're also going to see the exact same thing happen with Israel, okay? Because you have similarities too, where I think Israel's cities are going to be attacked. And then, Israel also is a very, important commercial um, city, around the world. They've, really kind of contribute a lot of things to, um, the economy around the world and stuff like that. Um, I mean, obviously, America's bigger, I think, in that respect, but, um, Israel has done some really neat things. Um, okay. So, time frames. Okay, so like I said, the first 30 days could be Trump's people protesting, April 26th through Memorial Day, and then the, you know, the next day, the day after Memorial Day, the second 30 days could be Obama's people, Black Lives Matter rioting, May 26th through June 24th. So the 10 horns, okay, in Babylon. And then it says, okay, so then what we have, oh yeah, so then it says, then they approached. So like I said, I think there's two different time frames of 30 days. Um, you know, so then, so I already talked about Daniel, do not, you know, any man who makes petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days is to be cast into the lion's den. Okay, so who will you bow to? You know, are you going to bow to Trump and, you know, that craziness? Or are you going to bow to this Black Lives Matter craziness? Um, okay, so then in Daniel 7, we see 4 beasts. And so I wanted to talk about that. So we had the first beast is the lion with eagle wings, and the wings are pluck and stands on 2 feet. Okay, so what I think is we have Netanyahu and Gantz are not waiting for the Messiah to give him the land. Okay. Um, so, oh, yeah. So what we have is like the lion would be, the lion of the tribe of Judah. So we have Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel. Um, and so what happens is his wings were plucked. Okay, so instead of waiting for the Messiah to give him the land, Netanyahu took it upon himself to, act like a messianic figure, which he got that idea from Trump, basically. And so then, and then it's interesting that this lion is standing on 2 feet, so I think that connects to how we're seeing that Netanyahu and Gantz, were able to form a government. And so what's interesting too is that, um, that concept of twins. I mean, we definitely kind of see that with Netanyahu and Gantz, of, just very similar, um, behavior and stuff like that. Um, so then, um, because Netanyahu wants to annex the land of Israel. He wants to annex, let's see, the West Bank. Um, and he wants that to happen by July 1st. Okay, so that's the other reason why tomorrow's kind of interesting, because it's a week before July 1st. But definitely, if something doesn't happen tomorrow, you know, it's, I think something's going to happen really soon. And so it's just kind of interesting that, you know, um, July 1st is coming up really fast. Um, and then, okay, so then the second beast is a bear with three ribs in his mouth. That would be Trump with his 666. Okay. And then we have the leopard with the four wings. Okay. So that would connect to Obama. So what's interesting if you think about the leopard is that it's funny that I said that like it's got leprosy. Um but what we have is Black Lives Matter with kind of this black, brown, white issue because a leopard is it has black and brown spots on a white background. Okay. So we see that connection, but also what's interesting is there's a connection with Black Lives Matter to the Black Panthers. Okay, so a leopard, um, a Black Panther is actually a leopard. Okay, um, they're from the same family. So that's would be the leopard. Okay, the four wings. We see that throughout Scripture. I think, um, so maybe there's like, oh, so the four wings actually. Okay, so here's one thought: is the four wings connect to like north, south, east, west, like the corners of the world. Okay, just kind of like they're all over the place. And but I also think there might be four people who would be, Obama definitely is one of them. You know, maybe Hillary Clinton would be another one. John Kerry maybe another one. The Pope could be another one of the four. Um, so not really sure. We'll have to see what happens. And then the fourth beast is the 10 horns. Um, and that would be the Black Lives Matter rioters. And so what's interesting in Daniel, we see Daniel says, while I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and three of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. Um, so what we're seeing is, okay, so while Trump is busy with the rioting in America, Iran and other places, other of Israel's enemies are, they they'll be free to attack Israel because Trump's a little busy right now. And then, oh, so it's interesting that I wrote, okay, so the little horn, um so it says that three horns were pulled out by the roots before it. um so I wrote the three roots can connect to the three baskets on the head of the Joseph story where the baker has three baskets on his head. Okay, I think that's also a connection to the three guys in the fiery furnace. Okay. um um and then it says this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. Okay, so we definitely see with the Iran guy where um they want to kill America, they want to kill Israel, and he's been making threats for a very long time. um and then when it says the horn possesses eyes like the eyes of a man, it's basically, I think that could be just a picture of Iran is constantly got his eyes on Israel, like focused on Israel. um you know because why does he care so much about this teeny tiny little nation of Israel? And it just has to do with the enemies of God. They hate, they hate God's people. um okay, so we're almost done here. Okay, so then the picture that I have is we have the sea of Obama on one side, the sea of Trump on the other. We want to be in the dry land with Messiah where there's no lies, because I kind of connect the sea to being lies. Um, and then, so God's people in the middle are the ones that are quiet. We follow the laws. We're wearing our masks. Because there was definitely a big connection with the coronavirus to Purim. Okay, and the Jewish people for Purim wear masks. Okay, so I think that was God's way of saying we want to wear masks. And I don't know why people wouldn't want to wear masks. Because they just, they talk about how effective they are, and you don't even need any really great special mask. You could have 3 layers of t-shirts material, and that would be enough to protect you. I mean, not 100% totally, but definitely cut down the chances of catching it greatly. Okay, and then the other thing too with God's people, we are going to stay outside of Babylon. Okay, and so then let's read this Revelation 16 verse. It says the great city was split into 3 parts. Okay, so this is the 3 parts here. Okay, but like I said, the 2 nations in the wound. Um, I talked about that. With the 2 nations. Um, maybe the 2 fighting would be the Obama people and the Trump people, and God's people are kind of quiet. They're not fighting. And then it says, and the cities of the nations fell. We definitely see that going on right now. Babylon the Great was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. Okay, so definitely see that happening right now. Okay, so then let's talk about, so then in Revelation 13, it talks about the 3rd beast, and it says, and he causes all the small and the great and the rich and the poor and the free man and the slaves to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. So, what I was thinking originally was that, the 3rd beast was Trump, you know, and I still believe that, and because the dragon is Obama, and then so that Trump was causing us to get a mark because of his 666, and but I also thought it was kind of interesting where um and so then I was trying to figure out, okay, so one thought I had was, we have all these Trump followers wearing these MAGA hats, okay, Make America Great Again hats. So that could be a picture of, being given a mark on your forehead. And so then I was like, well, then what would be a picture of like a mark on their right hand? So then I had this picture of the scales, so like the Trump followers would be the ones buying and selling. But then it dawned on me that maybe the mark on the forehead would be the Trump people, and then if you go over here with the seal of Obama, I put the Black Lives Matter fist. Um, and so that maybe that's, maybe God is kind of mixing who's got the mark. Okay. And so the forehead people are the Trump people, and the right hand people are the Obama people. So the Trump people would be they were the protesters who weren't wearing the masks, that are believing some of the crazy conspiracy theories of Trump. Okay. I mean, it was kind of interesting. Trump had his rally in Tulsa. Um, and so I wanted to mention, like, so someone there was talking about, like, they believed that Trump was going to save us from these rioters. Um, and it's kind of interesting because the rioters have been rioting for, 30 days now, or tomorrow would be the 30th day. And, we really haven't seen Trump do a whole lot. Like, I guess he's kept them okay in Washington, in DC, but, you know, he said he was going to do something about Seattle, but so far we haven't, like I said, you gotta watch what Trump does and not listen to what he says, because he says a lot, he boasts a lot. Okay. Um, so anyways, and then what's interesting too is Trump comes up with these conspiracy theories. Okay. Oh, a very good example of that is so with the Black Lives Matter rioters, Trump was talking about Antifa. Okay, so Antifa may or may not be involved, but we do know that Black Lives Matter is involved. Okay. And, it like we don't need to find another bad group of people to blame this on. We don't need to come up with conspiracy theory. We have the Black Lives Matter. We already know they're a bad group. Okay, but since Trump, he cares more about what people think, he doesn't want to be called a racist, he's bowing to Black Lives Matter. He made, um, he's putting in some reform to the police, Um, so I just thought that was kind of interesting. Very interesting. Um, so don't call a conspiracy what these people call a conspiracy. That's what God tells us in the word, because they're just kind of nuts. They're, God talks about putting a deluding influence on people in the last days. Okay. All these people, they're delusional. Okay. The Trump followers are delusional. I mean, the extreme, the ones that look at him like he's going to save us, um, I mean, not the conservatives, that are God's people, but the ones that see him as more of a messianic type figure. Um, and then it says, okay, so then for Obama, I put in this verse. Then another sign appeared in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns. So the 10 horns connect to Obama, the rioters. And on his head were 7 diadems. And his tail swept away a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. So that connects to the Revelation 16 um, verse. The great city was split into 3 parts. Okay. So, um, so that is what I wanted to say about that. Okay, so we will not bow, Daniel in the lion's den. Okay, do not bow. So like I said, maybe the 24th is day 30. Okay, so then it'd be interesting. So June 24th is 30 days of the rioters. Okay, so then it'd be really interesting to see what happens. So, and then 24, we see, Daniel in another chapter was talking about, he was mourning for 3 full weeks, so the 3 weeks I think connects to the 3 time frames of the shutdown, the 30 days of the Trump protesters, and then the 30 days of the rioters. And then Daniel says on the 24th day, you know, then he has a messianic encounter on the 24th day. So so it'd be interesting to see what happens tomorrow. Um, so, that was my video for today. So thank you so much for tuning in. So hang in there. I know it's difficult, but God has a plan. And at some point, He's going to send the Messiah to save us from this craziness, and, but continue to wear your mask. Continue to pray to God. Definitely, the Psalms are great for this time because there's a lot of lamenting Psalms. There's also some really good Psalms about like that have to do with like, I'm surrounded by my enemies, come save me, God, kind of type Psalms. Let's see if I can find one for you. Like, okay, I just read one today. Where is it? Like Psalm 9. So read that, because that's a very good psalm for our day and age, for what's going on now. So, anyways, so thanks for tuning in. God bless, and we will catch you later.